Hello. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome in if you're new around here. Today, I'd like to carry on a series of tutorials that I started about 2 months ago. This one. In the first part, I introduced the web app Photopea as a free alternative to Photoshop. Well, mostly free. And I went ahead and explained the basics of the program, going over a list of tools that I use more often than others. But I had to stop at a certain point because the video was getting a little too long, which turned into a hassle to edit. So now I'm here to pick up where I'd left it at. Last time I'd stopped at the type tool, so now I'm going to talk about the pen tool. The pen tool. I admit that the pen tool can be a little intimidating at first, but to be honest, I've been using it more often lately and working with it turned out to not be so daunting after all. Okay, here I have a blank canvas and I want a little more space to work with, so I'll collapse this window for now and make it full screen. Great. In order to select the pen tool, you either do so from the toolbar or you simply use the shortcut key for it, which is the letter B. Immediately, we look at the menu bar up here that has the parameters of the tool. We can either create a shape or a path. Let's select shape first. It gives us an option to fill the shape with a color, to give it a border or a stroke, and even to control the stroke. I select new layer and I draw a rectangle like so. Then I'll play with these parameters. This is where I want to draw your attention to the similarities between the pen tool and the selection tools. Just like the polygon tool, for example, you'll need to go back to the point of origin or the very first point of the shape in order to complete or close the shape. Secondly, we've seen what new layer does. Now let's see what the other options allow us to do. For example, unite. See the result? It's like an addition. You add to the same shape, whereas subtract allows you to subtract from the same shape, like so. Intersect, well, gives you the intersection between two shapes, and excludes the overlapping area between two shapes drawn on the same layer. Remember, always go back to the point of origin in order to close the shape you want to draw. Otherwise, it can get messy. After that, I'd like to point at the layer section. Look at the layer carrying the shape. This is the icon of a vector layer, not a raster layer, meaning whatever shape you draw with the pen tool is not measured by pixels, but by mathematical formulas, meaning that you can resize the shape to your heart's desire and it won't pixelize. Now, you're going to ask me, what's the point from using the pen tool to make shapes if there's literally a separate tool that creates geometrical shapes that is more precise than my hand? Well, I'm going to move on to the path option and explain why. Notice that if I create a path like so, it will not appear in the layer section, but in the path section instead. We can't even select the new layer option. That's because we have done nothing with this path yet. We are still in the process of deciding what it will be. Will it be a shape or a selection maybe? Let me show you where the power of the pen tool really lies. If I just hover over one of the key points that define the path, you'll see this little minus sign. And if I click, ta-da, it deletes said point. Now, if I hover over one of the lines that connect to the points, you'll see a little plus sign that appears, and you can guess what it does if I click on it. It adds a new point to the path. Okay, great. If I hover over a point and hold the control button, then drag it around, it allows me to move that point independently from the rest. But what if I hover over a point and hold the control button, but instead of dragging, I double click on it? These two little handles appear. In order to play with the handles, you hover over one of these little circles and again maintain the control button on your keyboard pressed. And hop, see what it does? You go from a sharp angle to a round one. Depending on which direction you rotate the handles, you can either make it round or twist it based on the result you want. However, notice that I said handles and not handle. That's because this is not one handle, but two. This one controls this side, and this controls the other side. If you want to manipulate each handle separately, all you'll have to do is hover over the handle you want to control and hold the Alt button on your keyboard. Ta-da! Now I am controlling only one side. The length of the handle controls the intensity of the curve, while the direction of the rotation, well, controls the degree of the curvature or the direction of the curve. Okay, let's make a crescent shape. So first I'll put up a grid to guide me a little. I'll create this triangle and move the points where I want them to be. Then double click on this point to make the handles appear. I'll elongate them to give the curve this intensity. I'll move on to the next point and play with the handles until I am satisfied with the result. Once I'm satisfied with my path, I can either fill it or create a selection. But note something. When I fill it or create a shape, it appears in the layer section. If you want to go back and edit the path, you simply select the path you want, and if you don't see the points, select the shape tool and draw something, anything. This should make the anchor points and the handles reappear. I mainly use the pen tool to select a certain object, to make precise selections, and also to create customized shapes. I am not going to go over every tool in the pen tool section because, well, free pen, I never use it. The curved pen allows you to create already curved shapes, like so, but you can modify them as you wish, exactly like we did before. Then for these, well, we already saw them. These tools are what we use to control our shapes and paths, but we used keyboard shortcuts, which are much more convenient than having to click a button each time. The path selection tool allows you to select a path and move it around on the canvas. The direct select tool allows you to select the shape and show more of its details, but also to modify it without going back to the path. The shape tool, unlike the pen tool, The shape tool allows you to create an already determined shape or path. Let's create a rectangle. And here are the parameters of the shape: filling color, the stroke, the type of line. These options again, and the ratio of the shape. Okay, so these round points, well, allow you to control the corners. If you select one of them and press the Alt key while dragging, you'll be able to control one single corner. You hover over these square points and drag them around. It allows you to manipulate the size freely. But if you want to keep proportions of the shape, when you drag the button around, you need to maintain the Shift key pressed. Going to the path section, you'll notice that along with the shape, a path has been created too, and you can do whatever you want with it. And by the way, if the shape you've created is vectorial instead of pixel-based, you can do a crossover and you can create your shape and then manipulate it with the pen tool. The cool thing about Photopea is that it has a wide variety of custom shapes already available for use. They're even categorized. Moving on to blend modes. Blend modes allow two layers to basically interact with each other. As you can see here, if I add another image on top of the first one, it'll cover it completely. Blend modes can kind of change that in different ways. They are technically separated into 6 groups, the default one being normal. Under the normal blend mode, nothing happens. It's the default blend mode, therefore the layers do not interact with each other. The dissolve mode is something I've very rarely used, so I won't be spending too much time on it. When selected, it seems like nothing is happening, but when you play with the opacity, the layer looks like it's dissolving spot by spot, whereas if you decrease the opacity under the normal mode, the layer starts vanishing smoothly. Darken and lighten modes. The next two groups are called darken and lighten respectively. I'm choosing to speak about these two together because they're basically opposites of each other. There are 5 modes in each of these two groups, and each one from one list has a direct counterpart in the other. Both of these groups operate based on brightness. Darken mode darkens. The result is tied to the difference in brightness between the two images you're using. Let's say I'm using a solid color, like so. Let's take a look at the brightness level it has, 63%, whereas the second image has, let's say this spot here, close to 100%. Let me change the blend mode and put it to darken. You'll note that any part from this image that has a level of brightness that is far superior to 63% and close to 100% has vanished, while any spot that has a lower than or close brightness to 63% remains. So for darken mode, the closer the color is to black or 0 brightness, the more it stays, and the closer it is to white or 100% brightness, the more it disappears. And lighten mode is the exact opposite. The lower the background's brightness, the more it disappears. Look at the tail of the bird, since it's pretty dark. It has almost completely disappeared and is replaced by this pink sort of color. Um, while the white clouds are mostly almost untouched. So, with these two modes, the result depends on the brightness of the images you choose. The multiply and screen modes. Similarly to the previous two, these ones operate based on brightness, but they do not depend on the difference in brightness between the two interacting layers. With multiply, the lower the brightness, the more it appears, and the closer to 100%, the more it disappears. You can see the difference when I switch between darken and multiply. For multiply, the closer a part of an image is to black, the more visible it is, regardless of the difference in brightness between layers. Look here, I'll decrease the brightness of the color. There is barely any change. But if I select darken, most of the image vanishes because most parts of the bird picture are much brighter than the color. Screen, on the other hand, is the perfect opposite of multiply. Anything that is remotely brighter than black will be visible, and anything that is black will vanish, regardless of the difference in brightness between layers. See the tail of the bird here again. When you pick screen, it doesn't completely vanish. That's because the brightness is close to 0%, but not exactly 0%. Now, look when I select lighten, the black color kind of completely disappears. Color burn and color dodge. These two are linked to the brightness of the background. We've talked about dodging and burning a bit in the previous part. I said that burning means to darken and dodging means to brighten, but what do they mean in this context? Notice what happens when I change the blend mode of this color layer to color burn. Not only does the color seep into the background, so basically it adds color, but the darker areas are further darkened or burned and colorized, while the brighter areas are left mostly the way they were. That's what burning does. It further darkens darker areas. Now you can guess that color dodging means adding color mainly to brighter areas, but also further brightening those bright areas. Linear burn and linear dodge. The difference between these two and the previous ones is that while it influences the brightness of the background image, it adds color to it in a linear manner, meaning that the amount of color added to a certain area is independent of its original brightness level. Example, in color burn, the pink color sort of affects the clouds, while in linear burn, the pink is very much on the clouds. Linear burn adds color regardless of brightness. It just further darkens darker areas. Linear dodge in this case also adds color regardless of brightness, but it further brightens lighter areas. Darker color and lighter color. These two operates mostly like darken and lighten respectively, but they're more intense. For example, darken hides brighter areas than the background here. Notice how the clouds are completely colored. That's because the brightness of the color I'm adding is far lower than that of the clouds. But if I select darker color, it completely hides anything that is remotely brighter than the color, anything at all. Same goes for lighter color. It completely hides anything that is darker than the background. Contrast group. In this group, we have 7 modes and they operate mostly based on, you guessed it, contrast. Let's start with overlay. Basically, it darkens what is already dark, but it also brightens what is already bright as long as it is a different color than a 50% gray. That's the only condition. If you're adding a color, the tint does seep into the background. Soft light mode is the same as overlay, but it's, well, softer. Hard light also adds contrast like overlay, but in a faded way. Vivid light is a bit like color burn. It allows the color to seep into the background you use, but as long as the color of your choice is not extreme, then the black and white areas of your image will remain intact. By extreme color, I mean one that is very saturated. Linear light, on the other hand, does affect the black and white areas of your image regardless of the saturation of the color you choose. Pin light is a combination of darken and lighten. Hard mix only preserves 8 colors: black, white, red, blue, yellow, magenta, cyan, and green. Anything other than these colors is eliminated. No shades in between. Let's go back to our bird here. We pick this blue color and switch to hard mix mode. And look at what it does to the colors. It simplifies them, the blue and cyan. It's a harsh mix of color, and that's why it has that title. The last two groups operate based on color. When you work on programs like Photopea, and when it comes to colors, besides the hex codes, these are the numbers you'll work with most of the time. Hue, which is the color itself or the root color. Saturation is the intensity of the color, and brightness too does affect a color, kind of the same way luminosity does. Then we have the amounts of red, green, and blue that constitute the color. So these are the parameters that will be influenced by the next groups of modes. The inversion and cancellation groups are mostly considered one. I myself rarely use the cancellation group, so I'd like to skip it altogether. Though if you still want to know how they function, you can still ask me in the comments. The difference mode. This gives you the exact difference between two overlapping colors. You can see that through their numbers actually. Let's take these two colors. Let's look at their value. If you calculate the difference between these two values, you'll find it's equal to the value of the resulting color. The component group. Starting with hue. Like I said before, the hue is the root color. It will only change the hue of the background image like so. It will basically colorize it. Notice that it doesn't touch the white and black parts. That's because the hue value is equal to 0 for white, and same thing for black. So, wherever there is hue, you'll see change. But if the value of the hue in the background image is equal to 0, then you'll see no difference. Saturation is the intensity of a color, or how much of a certain color do you want. Look at what it does when used. It simply accentuates the existing colors. The blend mode color will colorize the background image with whatever color you choose. And this time, the value of the hue does not matter. See, it kind of affects the white parts, unlike the hue mode. Luminosity mode is a practical one. Basically, it preserves the color on a certain image where you'd like to edit the brightness of luminosity, for example. Let's keep our lovely bird here. I want to edit the levels of brightness on this image. But if I do so, the saturation of the color will change too. This doesn't happen if I use the luminosity blend mode, however. It preserves the colors the way they were, while the brightness is affected. Okay, now it's time to talk about the special blending modes. Color burn, linear burn, color dodge, linear dodge, vivid light, linear light, hard mix, and finally, difference. These 8 blend modes are somewhat special because of the way these two parameters affect the result: opacity and fill. Example, let's use vivid light mode and then decrease the opacity. You do not get the same exact effect when you play with the fill parameter instead of opacity. Same goes for the other 7 on the list. Alright, I think that this video is going to be long enough with these 3 tools alone. Next video, I'd like to go over the menu bar and discuss the tools that I use the most when I work with the program. Like I said in the previous part, if you don't have the money to invest for your covers or whatever you need to do for your writing projects that is art related, then investing time might be a good alternative. And I know that these tutorials might seem like a lot at first, but whilst the series will be complete, I think that what I meant when I said that you shouldn't need years of experience will be clearer. Because I'm only giving you what has been necessary for me to work. I have to stress again that this will probably not make you a super professional, but it should get you to a comfortable position where you can come up with decent enough results for your projects. I hope this was helpful in any way, shape, or form. I also do hope to see you in the next video. But until then, please take care of yourselves, stay safe, and bye-bye.